How long does it take to read these two notes? If it takes more than a second or two, this video is for you. There are several ways to figure out the answer, but some are much faster and more reliable than others. The brute force approach would be to count up from the G line, but the farther the notes get above the top of the staff, the longer that takes. And with eyes as bad as mine, there's a pretty decent chance of getting lost and having to start over, or just coming up with a completely wrong answer. If I've memorized the reference notes I mentioned in part 2, I should know that the first note is a C, and from there I could count up to find that the second note is a B. But even that takes some time, and especially if I'm sight reading, it's doubtful that I'll be able to figure it out quickly enough to avoid a mistake. But if I've both memorized my reference notes and practiced reading by intervals, I can come up with the correct answer almost instantaneously. The term interval refers to the distance between two notes. Any two notes can be described in terms of an interval, but it's simplest to figure out when only white keys are involved, and that'll be the focus of this video. To determine the interval, I count all the white keys from one note until I get to the other one. 1, 2, so we call that a second. 1, 2, 3, that's a third. 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth, and so on. Middle C to treble G is a fifth, and so is bass F to middle C. It's important to remember to count both the starting note and the ending note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I count from middle C all the way up to the next C, I should come up with 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we could call this an eighth, but usually we use the term octave instead. Finally, the interval from a note to itself is called a unison. Reading these intervals off the page is often easier the closer the two notes are together. In these examples, most people could probably spot the second and third faster than the sixth or the seventh. This does get easier with time and practice, but there's also a trick that speeds things up. The key is to pay attention to which notes are written on lines and which are written on spaces. Notice how the odd-numbered intervals, the unison, third, fifth, and seventh, all consist of a line note followed by another line note. Meanwhile, the even-numbered intervals all contain one line note and one space note. If we slide everything down to start from a space note, now all the odd-numbered intervals contain two space notes, but all the even-numbered intervals still contain one line and one space. This is true no matter what note we start from. Odd-numbered intervals always contain either two lines or two spaces, and even-numbered intervals always contain one of each. Let's go back to the original example. If I'm in the habit of looking out for line notes versus space notes, I should immediately recognize that this is an odd-numbered interval, so I can rule out a sixth or an octave. It looks bigger than a third, so it's probably going to be a fifth, a seventh, or possibly even a ninth. With practice, it becomes quick to spot that it's a seventh, and a seventh above C is B, so that's how I'd find the answer. There are flashcards for practicing intervals, so if you've already memorized all the notes I talked about in part 2, practicing recognizing intervals quickly could be a good next step in improving your reading speed.